I'm going to tell you something that should bother you, and I mean really bother you, not in the way that a bad movie bothers you, but in the way that a crack in the foundation of a building bothers you. The human body is, from the perspective of any sufficiently advanced alien physicist, the most confusing object in the known universe. Not because it's complicated. Lots of things are complicated. Black holes are complicated. Quantum chromodynamics is complicated. No, the human body is confusing because it seems to violate every principle of elegant design that physics has spent 400 years establishing. It looks, from the outside, like it was built by a committee that couldn't agree on anything, revised by another committee that didn't read the first committee's notes, and then shipped anyway because the deadline was up. And before you tell me that's just evolution, yes, I know it's evolution. I've been hearing that answer my whole career every time a physicist pokes at biology and gets a strange look back. But that answer is a conversation stopper dressed up as an explanation. Evolution tells you the mechanism. It does not tell you why the mechanism produced something that to any alien scientist approaching it fresh would look like a fever dream compared to what physics says matter is supposed to do. So let's not hide behind evolution tonight. Let's actually look at this thing. Start from the beginning. Start from what we know. The universe, at its deepest level, is extraordinarily simple. I don't mean that in the casual way people say it. I mean it in the precise, mathematical, terrifying way. The standard model of particle physics describes everything we've ever observed in a laboratory using 18 parameters, 18 numbers. That's it. The entire visible universe, from quarks to galaxies, runs on 18 numbers and a handful of equations that fit on a t-shirt. When I was a student at MIT, and I'm not going to pretend I understood all of it the first time through, what struck me wasn't how hard the equations were. What struck me was how few of them there were. The universe is not verbose. It doesn't waste a word. It writes its laws in the sparsest possible language, and that language turns out to be sufficient for absolutely everything. Now, enter biology. Enter the cell. A single human cell contains approximately 6 feet of DNA. 6 feet. In something you cannot see without a microscope. That DNA encodes somewhere around 20,000 genes, which are themselves a small fraction of the total sequence, most of which we still do not fully understand. The cell uses that DNA to manufacture proteins roughly 100,000 different kinds. And each protein is a chain of amino acids that must fold into a precise three-dimensional shape in order to do its job. The folding is not guided. It happens spontaneously based on the laws of thermodynamics, which means that somehow the laws of thermodynamics, the same laws that govern the cooling of coffee and the expansion of gas in an engine, are doing protein origami inside you right now at millions of sites simultaneously, with an error rate so low that if you tried to manufacture anything else at that scale with that precision, you would be considered a god of engineering. And yet the system that does this was not designed. It emerged from chemistry, from the same physics that explains why oil and water don't mix. Here is where it gets strange. An alien scientist, let's call him, let's say it's a civilization that has mastered physics to the level that we have, or perhaps somewhat beyond. They've solved quantum gravity, let's say. They know what space-time is made of. They arrive at Earth, they collect a sample, they look at it, and the first question they ask is, what kind of computational architecture is this? Because they will immediately recognize that the cell is performing computation. It is reading information, processing it, executing programs, correcting errors, and passing modified copies to the next generation. This is computation. But it is computation that uses no silicon, no binary code, no circuit board. It uses water, salt, carbon chains, and quantum mechanical tunneling in enzyme active sites, which we still do not have a complete theory of, I should tell you. And anyone who tells you we do is oversimplifying. The alien looks at this and says, this is the strangest implementation of information processing I have ever seen. And the alien is correct. Now, let me tell you something that happened to me early in my career that changed how I thought about all of this. I was a young professor barely out of my postdoc, and I was at a conference in Aspen, the physics kind, not the skiing kind. Though there was skiing, and I found myself in an argument with a biologist about whether the genetic code was arbitrary. He thought it was essentially random, a frozen accident of early chemistry, and I thought, no, wait, if you look at the structure of that code, if you look at which codons map to which amino acids, there is a pattern. There is a non-random relationship between the physical and chemical properties of the codons and the properties of the amino acids they encode. It's not perfect. It's not what physicists would call elegant, but it's not random either. It's something in between, which is actually worse, because something in between means the universe was trying to do something and didn't quite finish. And I have never been comfortable with the idea that the universe leaves things half done. The genetic code is 4 letters, A, T, G, C, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. These are not arbitrary. They are 2 pairs of molecules that are each other's complements by hydrogen bonding. This is a fact of quantum chemistry. The pairing rules that make DNA a double helix, that make replication possible, that make the whole information storage system work, are not design choices. They fall out of the electromagnetic interaction between molecules. Somebody, nature, the laws of physics, whatever you want to call it, got very lucky that a molecule capable of stable self-complementary pairing also happened to be a molecule that could catalyze its own replication under early Earth conditions. Or it wasn't luck, and that's the option that keeps me up at night. Here is another thought experiment. Imagine you are an alien physicist, and you have just discovered the human immune system. Not the whole thing, just the adaptive immune system. Just the part that generates antibodies. Your immune system can generate approximately 10 billion distinct antibody molecules. 10 billion. That is more than the number of distinct proteins that evolution has actually invented in the entire history of life on Earth. Your immune system generates that diversity not by having 10 billion different genes that would be impossible. You don't have nearly enough DNA. But by taking about 200 gene segments and shuffling them together in different combinations, then adding random mutations at the joints. It is running a combinatorial algorithm in the cells of your bone marrow right now, producing a molecular library of unimaginable diversity, so that when a pathogen you have never seen before arrives, there is likely to be at least one antibody in that library with at least partial complementarity to its surface. And when that antibody finds its target, the cell that makes it gets a signal to multiply, so the system amplifies the rare hit and suppresses the misses. It is, and I say this as a physicist who has spent his life studying quantum systems, one of the most sophisticated search algorithms I have ever encountered in any physical system. It is doing what a physicist would call importance sampling in a space of 10 billion dimensions with proteins. Now, here is the problem. Here is what the alien physicist notices that we, famously, tend to overlook. This system can also attack you. The same diversification mechanism that gives you the ability to respond to 10 billion different pathogens also means that occasionally, with certain probabilities that are set by the underlying physics, the system generates an antibody that binds to your own tissue. Autoimmune disease, your body attacking itself. This is not a bug in the human sense of the word. It is an unavoidable consequence of the mechanism. If you want diversity sufficient to cover pathogen space, you will pay a price in self-reactivity. There is no free lunch. The alien physicist writes in their notebook, the organism has a defense system that is optimized for generality at the cost of self-discrimination. This is a known trade-off in high-dimensional search problems. Interesting that biological evolution converged on the same solution we derived analytically. And then they flip the page and write, also, the organism breathes oxygen, which damages its own DNA at a steady rate throughout its lifetime. Unclear why this design choice was made. Let me explain that one, because it is genuinely extraordinary, and I think it doesn't get enough attention outside of biochemistry. Oxygen metabolism, the process by which your cells turn glucose and oxygen into ATP, the energy currency of the cell, produces as unavoidable byproducts molecules called reactive oxygen species, free radicals. These molecules damage DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. Your body has extensive antioxidant systems to mop them up, but they are not perfect, and the damage accumulates over a lifetime. This is, in large part, what aging is. Aging is fundamentally the cost of using oxygen. You are burning in slow motion. The fire that keeps you alive is the same fire that eventually consumes you. And the reason you use oxygen in the first place is that about 2.4 billion years ago, a group of bacteria called cyanobacteria invented photosynthesis and flooded the atmosphere with oxygen, which was at the time a catastrophic pollutant that killed most of the life on Earth. Your ancestors were the ones that survived by learning to use the poison as fuel. And so here you are, a billion years later, still using the poison as fuel, still paying the price, still running the antioxidant cleanup crew, still aging. A physicist designing a metabolic system from scratch would not choose this. They would find a less corrosive energy source. But a physicist designing a metabolic system from scratch has the luxury of starting over. Evolution does not have that luxury. Evolution can only modify what already exists. And so the human body is not a designed object, it is a palimpsest, a document written over and over on the same piece of parchment, old text still showing through beneath the new. Now here is where the physics connects to something genuinely vast. And I want you to follow me carefully because this is the part that I find most unsettling. In the 1970s, a physicist named John Archibald Wheeler proposed what he called the it from bit hypothesis. The idea is that at the most fundamental level, physical reality is not made of matter and energy, it is made of information. That the universe is, in some deep sense, a computational system, and that particles and fields and space-time itself are emergent phenomena arising from the processing and storage of information. This is not a fringe idea. It connects directly to work in quantum information theory, to the holographic principle, which I spent a large part of my career developing, along with Gerard Hooft, to the black hole information paradox, which, if you've been following the field, is still not fully resolved, despite what some people have implied. The information paradox is not solved. We have better ideas than we did in 1993. We do not have the answer. But here is the connection I want to draw. If Wheeler is right, if information is fundamental, then the cell is not just analogous to a computer. It is a computer in the precise, rigorous sense of the word. It processes information, it stores information, it transmits information to its descendants, and if the universe is fundamentally informational, then the cell is not some strange exception to the laws of physics. It is physics doing what physics most deeply wants to do. It is the universe computing itself. And if that is true, then the alien physicist looking at the human body is not looking at an anomaly. They are looking at a mirror. They are looking at what happens when information processing, operating under the constraints of thermodynamics and chemistry and evolutionary history, scales up to the complexity of 1 trillion cells operating in concert, producing a structure that is aware of its own existence, that can look up at the sky and ask why it's there. That is us. That is you. And the alien physicist stares at this for a very long time. And in their notebook, they write, the most remarkable feature of this system is not its complexity. It is that the system knows it is complex. It models itself. It questions its own design. Let me tell you one more thing, and then I'll leave you with something to think about on the drive home. I have spent 50 years in theoretical physics. I have worked on string theory before people called it string theory. I fought with Stephen Hawking publicly, in print, in front of audiences, about whether information falls into a black hole and stays there or comes back out. I was right about that, by the way, and I am not modest about it because modesty in physics is how wrong ideas stay alive longer than they should. I have thought more than is probably healthy about the nature of space-time and what it means for information to be physical. And I can tell you that the question of why the human body is the way it is, why it is so strange, so inefficient, so kludged together, so beautiful in spite of itself, that question sits right at the intersection of physics and biology and information theory, and I do not think any of those fields, individually or together, has answered it. We don't know why life exists. We don't know why consciousness arose. We don't know whether, given the same initial conditions, it would arise again. We have theories. We have good theories, but we do not have the answer. And here is the thing that I want to leave you with, the thing that when I wake up at 3 in the morning and cannot go back to sleep is what I'm thinking about. The laws of physics are time symmetric. The fundamental equations, quantum mechanics, general relativity, the standard model, they don't care which way time goes. Run them forward or backward, they work just as well. But the human body is deeply, irreversibly temporal. It is born, it develops, it ages, it dies. It carries the arrow of time in its very structure. The DNA damage that accumulates over a lifetime cannot be undone. The second law of thermodynamics runs in one direction only, and the human body is a machine that exists entirely in the shadow of that one directionality. We are creatures of the second law. We are local decreases in entropy sustained by a constant input of energy from a star 93 million miles away, and the moment that input stops, the moment the food runs out or the heart stops beating, the second law takes over and the order unravels. The alien physicist looks at this and does not see an organism. They see a fluctuation. A temporary, improbable, self-sustaining decrease in entropy. A brief eddy in the river of the second law. And they wonder, as I wonder, whether that eddy is the most interesting thing in the universe, or whether it is just the thing in front of them and the universe is full of eddies like it, or stranger ones that we will never see. That's the question. I don't have the answer. Neither do you. But now, at least, you know why it's a physics question.